A very good evening. You're watching our very special show on Canada elections, and Canada decides. Over the course of the next 1 hour, we will get you all that is mattering in the Canadian elections as voting starts. I'm Gauri Dwivedi, but first up, the headlines. High stakes battle opens as the polls across Canada open. Voters head to ballots in polls that may have been overturned by US President Donald Trump. Final set of opinion polls project narrow Liberal victory. Liberals hold a 4-point lead in the latest polls. Will Carney secure a victory, a record fourth-term victory for Liberal Party? We find out. Suspect in the Vancouver attack charged with 8 counts of murder. Suspect charged after Vancouver attack killed 11. Will that impact pockets of Vancouver in terms of voter turnout? We find out. The first polls have opened in Canada, in Newfoundland and parts of Labrador. Prince Edward Island, there are 4 seats that are up for grabs and several others as well. And what happens next going forward is what we are going to find out. There are, New Brunswick has 10 and in Nova Scotia there are 11 seats. The next set of polling stations will open in just under 2 hours, with people in Ontario, Quebec and others stretching all the way to British Columbia getting ready to vote. Remember, British Columbia will actually continue to vote till the end, even as other parts of Canada will shut when it comes to voting and will await results. Canada is the world's second largest country in terms of land, and which is why the entire exercise also is spread across different time zones. All right, Let's quickly now show you all that matters in this election. Before I get in, Maha Siddiqui, my colleague, joining me live from Canada, I want to quickly put out details with regard to what are the key factors in this election that matter. And then we, of course, get you who's who in this election, which are the primary candidates, the people who will, one of the candidates who is set to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, whether it will be Mark Carney or whether it is going to be Pierre. We're going to get that. But first up, let's quickly get in some graphic points to talk more about what are the aspects that the election will be decided upon. I believe I have Vikram Chaudhary joining me live from Brampton to talk more about what he's picking up on ground. Vikram, what's the mood like in Brampton? Talk to us. Have you been able to speak to some voters, the issues on which they will actually be deciding this election on?
It's going to be very close this time, that's for sure. The mood and the sentiment is quite divided, and things were very clear. If you would have asked me this question about 3 months ago, the mood was very clear. That was the time when people were for change. But now, ever since Mark Carney, he took over as the Prime Minister of Canada, which was in May first week. After that, things have changed a lot. And before that, they were the real local issues that people were more talking about, like the crime, inflation, the cost of living, immigration. Those were the local issues. The tone was very different. But ever since the rhetoric, the tariffs, the Trump tariffs kicked in, the mood and perhaps the issues, other issues took a back burner. And today, what everybody is more concerned about is the Trump tariffs, the economy, and looking forward, who perhaps would be the best candidate to take on Trump and the 51 state rhetoric, which is coming from across the border. So that's the real issue. And the entire campaign took a new turn, and they were trying to project, both the leaders they were trying to project as who is best suited to take on and perhaps negotiate a better deal with the US. So what I can tell you right now, Mark Carney has little edge as it has been projected in media and some exit polls and opinion polls, they've been trying to suggest that Mark Carney has a little bit of edge, but it's too close a call to suggest whosoever has the edge right now. But looks like Mark Carney has the edge, and Pierre perhaps was clearly a leader. If you talk about these opinion polls and projections 3 months ago, around about December of 2024, Pierre was clear leader. But things have changed.
Things have changed, absolutely.
What many suggest that...
Yeah, things have changed sharply, and as you rightly pointed out, that it is Donald Trump effect, where Mark Carney, whose ratings, and in fact the Liberal Party's ratings, which had plummeted to early 20s, is now probably at record high of early 40s. That's been the kind of change that has happened in the sentiment. Vikram, I want to quickly tell our viewers the constituencies from where Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre will be contesting from, because that's important. Either one of them is likely to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. If they, of course, don't get past the halfway mark, then they may need to take the help of some of the smaller parties. Stay with me, Vikram. I want to quickly tell the viewers that Mark Carney is contesting from Nepion's seat, which is an area in Ottawa, of course, Ontario. This will be the first time that the Prime Minister will be contesting for an election. He's 60 years of age. The first time his name is on the ballot is now. Will he bring the Liberals back for a fourth term is the key question. As for Pierre Poilievre, he is contesting from Carleton, which is a rural area of Ottawa, and there nearly 44,000 votes were cast, which is 40% of the riding's voters. Ridings is what they are called there. 40% of them happened during early voting. 71,000 people total voted in Carleton in 2021, with some 31,000 doing so in advance. So that 31,000 figure has become 44,000 this time around, which is why it's important to tell our viewers. Then, of course, the competition for both the men primarily is from the other main party, which is for Conservative, it is the Liberals, and for Liberal, it is the Conservative. They are primarily the other main opposition party, with some of the other smaller parties likely to be wiped out in this election. Vikram, let me now ask you the main issue on which you think this election is actually being contested on. We're talking about Trump, but it's essentially the Canadian identity, isn't it? That Canadians are now voting primarily because they feel that the Trump administration has been making a threat or coming down heavily on the Canadian identity.
Canadian identity, of course, is a major issue, but there's one more issue which is related to it. US was a major trading partner for Canada. Lots of goods from Canada go to US, and the industry and the economy is dependent upon US's economy as well. And they were the closest allies. If you look back into history, Canada and US were very close allies, and auto sector was a major component of the trade, where parts would get manufactured in Canada, go back to US, where they would fit it into an engine, come back to Canada, and they would put it into car, and then it will get sold in US, and then vice versa. There were many cars which were coming from US, but the problem here is it's Canadian identity, and also what many Canadians believe that backstabbed. They've been backstabbed by US Donald Trump. So it's economy and identity which has clearly taken the main focus here in Canadian politics, the federal politics. So because provincial politics is different here in Canada. And if you talk about federal politics, there are two tiers of political systems in Canada. But right now, when you have to negotiate or perhaps talk to your largest trading partner, of course, they'll be looking at leader who can do that. Right now, the priorities have changed. In December, the issues were different. But ever since Donald Trump has come over, and he's talked about taking over Canada as 51 state, and then also the Trump tariff. So issues have really changed right now. It's a question of survival. for Canada.
It's a question of survival for Canada, Vikram. I want to quickly tell our viewers that the early election polling data that has come in, it's been record high early voting took place. Remember, that is something that happened before today. Right now, polls have opened, election has started. People can now queue up and go and exercise their franchise, go and elect whoever they feel should be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Canada has the first past the post format, exactly like what the UK has or what India has. Having said that, the early election trends that I want to quickly tell, 7.3 million electors voted, which is a 25% increase from 2021. And I'm going to come back and ask Vikram and some of the other guests as to the significance of more people voting online this time as compared to 2021, which was a COVID year election. Second, highest early voting actually took place in Ontario, and the highest early voting in the riding took place in Carleton, which is where Pierre Poilievre is actually contesting from. On that note, I want to quickly play out this report, viewers, that really tells and sets the context for why this election is so important for Canada, for the world, and for India as well. Take a look at this report.
With the nation at political crossroads and an election that could redefine its future, Canadians are all set to head to the polls to elect which party will lead their government and take the nation forward. On April 28th, Canadians will cast their votes in perhaps the most pivotal election in recent history. With the economy faltering, tension with the US escalating, and the resignation of a former Prime Minister still echoing, the country faces a moment of reckoning. Five main parties are in the race: the Liberal Party, the Conservatives, the New Democratic Party, the Sovereignist Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party. But at the heart of the battle, it's a showdown between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Carney, a former central banker, aims to distance himself from Trudeau's legacy while still advocating for core Liberal policies. But his short stint as Prime Minister leaves his political identity still somewhat undefined. Conservative leader Pierre is capitalizing on nearly a decade of Liberal dissatisfaction. His message is clear and relentless. After 9 years of Liberal rule, it's time for change. Poilievre is channeling voter frustration into momentum, zeroing in on the daily struggles of Canadians, from immigration concerns and rising crime to the crushing cost of living. Adding fuel to the fire is an increasingly hostile trade war with the US. Trump's repeated threats, including calls to make Canada the 51st US state, has intensified tension and turned foreign policy into a central election issue. For India, the Canadian election comes in the shadow of strained ties due to Trudeau's policies that promoted and sheltered Khalistanis. Will a new Prime Minister mean a new chapter in Delhi-Ottawa ties? Remains to be seen. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, I'm going to slip into a very short break, come back on the other side, talk more about the Canadian elections, the impact, and the big questions that we always pose. Stay with us. You're watching Canada Decides, and we're putting out the big questions that matter in these elections. First up, we are asking, is Trump essentially the deciding factor? Remember, everything seemed to have changed ever since Donald Trump came to power and Mark Carney replaced Justin Trudeau. So is he essentially the big factor that is deciding these elections. Next up, is this the end for NDP and some of the smaller parties? With the fact that the Conservatives and Liberals are in a neck-to-neck race, Liberals are leading, has this taken away the space for all left-leaning parties like NDP and some of the others? Next up, we are asking the other big question, will Pierre Poilievre's Canada First policy be his downfall? In fact, a lot of voters see him as being some sort of an extension of Donald Trump. He was not very stinging in his criticism, and has that been one of the primary reasons why his ratings have dipped? The next question that we are asking is, will Vancouver attack actually impact the voter turnout? Elections are underway, voting has started. What about the attack in Vancouver and its impact on voter turnout? And last question, how will parties counter Trump's tariffs? None of the two candidates have really come out with a counter, a solid reply as to what is it that they will do when they come to power. What is it that they will do to solve the Trump tariff problem? Let's now quickly get in Terry Miliski, who's joining me from, right there. There's Terry Miliski, who's retired senior correspondent of CBC, is joining me from Toronto. Sharon Kaur, who's a political strategist, and we also have Dr. Dennis as well, Department of Politics, Liberal Arts and Professional Studies of York University. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me. In fact, let me start with you, Sharon. You are the woman on the panel. Let me give you the first question. How do you see these elections shaping up? It was pretty dramatically different just before Donald Trump came to power, and it almost seems like things have gone completely different. What do you think is the deciding, driving factor here?
Yes, so we've definitely seen a complete shift in the polls and in public sentiment since, I would say, the fall of 2024. A lot of this has to do with two determining factors here. One being the shift of the leadership of the Liberal Party. Justin Trudeau is no longer the Prime Minister. Mark Carney is the Prime Minister and the leader of the Liberal Party. And Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been a very large part of the change in sentiment with his constant threats of annexation, the 51st state comments, and referring to the Prime Minister as governor. We've seen Mark Carney, who came in and was able to diffuse a lot of the tensions with Donald Trump, who's predominantly his biggest issue was with the previous administration. So we've seen a shift in public sentiment. People would like somebody who can handle Donald Trump. Okay. The threats of tariffs are extremely high and they impact our economy significantly.
Okay, Dr. Dennis, Trump is an important factor, but both the primary candidates seem to be talking about pretty much the same set of things. They are talking about housing, they're talking about an economic crisis that is looming in Canada. So it's not like they're talking on completely different aspects of what this election is all about.
Yeah, I mean, domestic issues remain really strong in this election, and that's what the Conservatives had built their lead over Trudeau on, was unhappiness about inflation, unhappiness about housing. You know, these are bread and butter issues that really, hit home, close to a lot of Canadians. So it's not surprising to see those issues come forward. There's people who are committed on both sides, and that hasn't changed. What's changed are the swing voters, those voters who might go back and forth between the different parties. And that's where we've seen a considerable number who'd gone away from the Liberals come back in the context of a new leader, the end of Trudeau, the end of the carbon tax, and of course, Trump's oversized personality coming into this election.
Terry, how important are these swing voters? And do you think they are essentially going to be deciding who gets to be the next Prime Minister of Canada?
Yes, they may already have done so, in fact. The swing voters have swung mightily within the past couple of months. If you'd interviewed all of us a couple of months ago, we would have said the election's practically over, the Liberals are toast, they're finished, and Justin Trudeau is in the dustbin of history. It's going to be a Conservative government. And of course, all of that changed because of Mr. Trump. And because he's threatened not just Canada's economy through his tariff campaign, but also Canada's very existence as an independent country, with his constant mocking insults of Trudeau as the governor of the 51st state and so forth. Canadians have been, in a word, outraged by the Trump approach to Canada, by the insults and the mockery, and they're not going to put up with it. And that is why you see not only in the polls generally, but in the advance polls that have already taken place over the past week here in Ontario and elsewhere around the country, the early morning polling that's already happening on the East Coast. What you see is a much larger turnout than normal, and that is significant because it reflects the strength of feeling, obviously. And there's no question,
Yes.
I think, that feeling, that strength of feeling is directed at Mr. Trump. And
Yes.
it's not about Canadian issues, really.
Yes.
But I agree that those are important, but it's not about how much you hate the Liberals. It's about how much you hate Donald Trump.
Indeed, he's been one unifying factor for Canadians. I'm going to now ask about the one aspect which impacts our viewers even more directly, which is the India-Canada relationship. It's probably saw its lowest ebb during Justin Trudeau's tenure. It's recovered from that with Mr. Carney coming in. How do you see that being impacted with whoever is the next Prime Minister of Canada, whether it is Mark Carney or whether it is Mr. Poilievre? Let me start with you, Terry, and then I get in Sharon and Dr. Dennis.
Well, I think there's going to be, from the external perspective, looking at Canada from anywhere else in the world, you'll see, ho-hum, another boring Canadian election, nobody much cares. But this is different, I think, because Mark Carney has, if he is successful, and the pollsters seem fairly confident that he will be, then he is becoming a bit of a standard bearer for the resistance, if I can put it that way, to Mr. Trump's tariff program. Mr. Carney can legitimately say that he's been around the block a few times. He knows his way around international finance. He knows every finance minister in the world from his years as a leading central banker and a bank regulator. And this experience, most Canadians seem to think, is extremely relevant. By contrast, if Mr. Poilievre were to be successful tonight, then you wouldn't see quite the confrontational attitude that the Liberals take. Remember that during the campaign, Poilievre, he picked as a slogan, for example, Canada First, which is a direct rip-off of
America
Trump's
First.
America First.
Yes.
It's a different story now. That it seems that Trudeau's legacy has been cast out into the dustbin of history, and Carney is, I think, set to win this evening, although it may not be a majority.
Okay, if it may not be a majority, I'm going to come back and ask what will that mean for some of the smaller parties. But Sharon, talk to us about the India-Canada relationship, because that's also extremely important for New Delhi that's watching this election very closely. How do you see that now after today's results come out?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to take place between Canada and India on the diplomacy front. We've gone through a pretty tumultuous diplomatic relations for the last, I would say, several years. And I think both sides, both India and the Canadian government, need to come together in good faith and have a conversation on how we can get to a place where our diplomatic relations are a lot better than they were previously. Canada has a very large Indian population. I come from the community, and I know that there's been challenges amongst certain aspects of the community and the Indian government. And I think it's in everyone's best interest that we flip the page and have new diplomatic relations where we can find ways to work together.
Indeed. Dr. Dennis, let me then ask you about the one factor, which is the growing issue with regard to Khalistanis. And then, of course, we talk about some of the other factors. Do you think that's an important aspect that's coming up in these elections?
The aspect of, one more time?
The Khalistanis.
I mean, I'm not an expert on that issue, so I'm afraid I can't speak to it.
I'm happy to talk about that since I come from that community, if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, the issue of the Khalistani community here in Canada is something that both Canada and India need to speak to with a leveled head. There is a lot, I would say, on both sides that has been challenging. There's a large population of Canadians who are from the Sikh community who would like to live in peace and have good relations with India. And there's also a population of Canadians who are from a pro-Palestinian movement. But I'm not done yet. But it requires.
No, you are not done. But I am done because you are talking about Canadians who are interested in supporting Khalistanis. So unfortunately, that's a red line for me. That's a red line for me, Sharon, which is why I wanted Dr. Dennis to come in there. I'm going to slip into a break and I'm going to give you a lot of time to speak on it, provided we do not talk about the Canadians supporting Khalistanis, because that is the very reason why the relationship actually saw its nadir last year. I'm going to slip into a very short break, come back on the other side, continue this big conversation around Canada Decides. The voting has started, it has begun. It's an extremely important election for Canada, for the world and for India. And Canada Decides get you all the latest information and details. Stay with us. You're watching Canada Decides with me, Gauri Dwivedi. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about why this election matters to the world, to Canada and to India. The issues that are at stake here. What is it that the Canadians will actually be voting on? And the India-Canada ties, they are at a breaking point, a tipping point rather. And I'm going to play out that report also in just a bit. But before that, I want to quickly introduce the guest joining me this evening. In the studio with me is Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. He's been the former Consul General of India in Toronto to understand what are the issues at stake here. From Toronto, Priti O'Brien-Martin will be joining me. She's a candidate for the House of Commons and she's a Liberal Party candidate, except that her father was actually a Conservative MP 7 times, if I'm not wrong, from Deepak Oberoi. Okay, we're also going to get Daniel Bodman in just a bit. But before that, Ambassador Bhatia, let me start with you in terms of the importance of this election, why this matters. And though, of course, the country has gone through a dramatic change in the last about 2 decades or so, what, in your opinion, could be the key factors that will really shape up this election and decide the result?
Both the points in your question are very important. I think firstly, in my view, in the recent history of Canada, this is one of the most consequential elections that is taking place in the country. It will first of all determine the domestic political landscape to decide which party or which parties will rule the country or govern the country. Secondly, it will naturally decide the pattern of economic management that would be very significant, and all the issues relating to it, immigration, crime and the rest of it. Thirdly, I think very clearly, that is known to everybody, it will determine the US-Canada relations, a relationship which has been always considered to be very positive and good, but it has gone through a major crisis in the last few weeks. And above all, I think it will also influence how Canada's role and position in the world is determined. So from all 4 or 5 perspectives, this would be a very significant election. When it comes to this whole question of what might happen, I think all that I can say is that opinion polls have already delivered their verdict.
They've given a 3 percentage point lead.
Yes,
to
but often they do go wrong, and therefore we will have to wait until the voters have spoken.
Absolutely. And in fact, as Canada heads to these elections, elections are in fact underway. Voting has started. Stakes are very high for the nearly 2 million Indo-Canadians, from rising Khalistan-linked extremism to immigration limbo and a historic plunge in Indian student numbers. India-Canada ties are at a breaking point, tipping point rather, and this report tells you why.
Once hailed as a thriving relationship, India-Canada ties are now mired in mistrust. The flashpoint, Khalistan extremism. Ottawa had been ignoring extremist threats for years under Trudeau for a few thousand votes. The murder of Khalistani extremist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, followed by Trudeau's baseless accusations, shattered diplomatic protocol.
Fundamental error.
Diplomats expelled, student visas slashed, ties in tatters. The biggest drop came in student enrollment, down nearly 100,000 in a year. Meanwhile, Indo-Canadian migrants find themselves stuck without work permits, healthcare, or legal status. With Trudeau out of the picture and Khalistan sympathizer Jagmeet Singh's NDP projected to shrink, India is watching closely. Either of the sides winning signals a reset in ties. But will that be enough to rebuild trust? From ballots to back channels, what happens after the 28th of April could very well redefine the future of 2 million Indo-Canadians. For Indo-Canadians, meanwhile, this isn't just another election. It's about identity, safety, and the future of a complex relationship with deep roots. Arjun Samar Mahindran for NDTV World.
All right, let's get in my colleague Maha Siddiqui, who joins me live from Canada to give us a sense of what's the mood like on election day. What is it that voters are likely to decide on? Maha, thanks much for joining us. It's a bright morning there. Talk to us about what is it that voters that you've been able to speak to are saying and what's on their minds.
So, Gauri, here on the West Coast, the voting is going to start in another half an hour. The East Coast, the voting has already started. Even in central Canada, Mountain Time, voting has already started. The biggest issue right now for all Canadians is Donald Trump and the trade war with the US, as well as the annexation threat that is coming from the US, remains top of the mind for the voters. And that is why we are seeing people turn out in large numbers in the advance voting as well, 25% up from last time around from 2021. And similar expectations from the voters are held today by Election Canada, though they've been very cautious as to whether the final voter turnout will be any better than last time, which was 63%, and any better, especially from the youth, 18 to 24 years, which was pretty low last time around at 47%. And they had special booths set up for specifically students last week, where students could come and vote no matter where they were, so that they could also be participants in this electoral process. But clearly the issue that is top of the mind for most of the voters is this threat from the US, and they want to give a clear mandate to one of the two parties. This has become a two-horse race in Canada between the Liberals and the Conservatives, with Bloc Québécois and the NDP losing their voters or their supporters this time around, primarily because of this threat from the US. Most voters are clear that they want to give either of these two parties a clear majority so that they're able to take on Donald Trump with all firmness. And that is why we have seen some of the domestic issues slide to number two, which are again very critical for the Canadians. But in view of the threat from the US, they have shifted as number two in priority for them. For instance, inflation, rising prices of commodities, as well as the housing crisis that people was witnessing over the last 1 year, high rentals. Those were big issues for the Canadians. But right now, as I'm pointing out, the biggest threat is from the US. The voters in the advance polling, there were long queues, Corey, over here. People were in fact having to wait, which is unusual for Canadians. But they said that they are going to exercise their right to vote, cast their ballots, specifically because they want a strong Canada to turn out from this very consequential election, as we've been talking about it, that this is a pivotal moment for Canada, not just in terms of their own economics, but also in terms of their position in the world.
Absolutely. Maha, thanks much for bringing us up to speed with that. You pointed out the numbers in terms of historic voting, early voting, 7.3 million electors voted, a 25% increase since 2021, highest in the state of Ontario, and the highest early voting took place in the riding of Carleton. So those, of course, were numbers really setting the context of why Canadians feel this is a make or break moment for them and their political history at this stage. All right, let's get inside. Vikas Bagre, who's the Vice President and co-founder of a key important network of colleges, joins me on the broadcast. Thanks, Mr. Bagre, for speaking to NDTV. Let me start by asking you, how important has been economy and economic issues for Canadians in this election, given the fact that everything seems to be coming second to Donald Trump, except for the state of the economy?
Absolutely. Very good morning to the NDTV viewers across India and across the globe. You're absolutely right there. Economics should have been the key focus, and it was till December 2024. Till Mr. Poilievre was gaining ground, heavy momentum. Mr. Trudeau resigns, and then Mr. Trump is sworn in as the president of US. And that shifted the the whole pattern and the narrative from focus on economics to national issues. As you rightly pointed out, the election is being held under the cloud of very nationalist kind of an idea where US is raising the heat in terms of Canada being its 51st state. And a lot of Canadians are against this fundamental idea. And the tariff war seems to have hit the Canadian economy and likely to continue to hit the Canadian economy severely. So economic issues have taken a backseat, and honestly, I think that should have been the ground, because Canada has had a simple promise to people who come to Canada: work hard, basically you will get a nice life, a beautiful house, and you could retire seeing your grandchildren grow. But that promise kind of have been dented with the policies over the last 10 years that have been in play. And hopefully the election is still focused, the electorate is still focused on ensuring that they get their fight right in terms of their voting patterns. But early voting, a very heavy turnout usually is a good sign for change in the air. Whatever might be the case, I think what Canada deserves today is a strong government. Hopefully it's not a fractured mandate like the previous two times.
Okay, let's in fact quickly address, well, we've been talking about Mr. Trump. He's also tweeted. Let's quickly now put that out. He has tweeted, he's put that out on Truth Social. He has said that good luck to the great people of Canada. Elect the man who has the strength and wisdom to cut your taxes in half, increase your military power for free to the highest level in the world, have your car, steel, aluminium, lumber, energy and all other businesses quadruple in size with zero tariffs. If Canada becomes the cherished 51st state of the US. He's not kidding. He's actually tweeted this and put this out on the day Canada elects its next Prime Minister. No more artificially drawn line from many years ago. Look how beautiful this landmass would be. Free access with no border, all positives with no negatives. Those are, of course, all caps in typical Mr. Trump style. It was meant to be. America can no longer subsidize Canada with hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we have been spending in the past. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. This is going to stir up more emotions, will this not, Ambassador Bhatia?
Undoubtedly, yes. I think all that one can say is that it looks like a claim to say that I am also the candidate.
Yeah, yes.
But on a serious note, I think as a scholar on Canadian affairs, one can see that both the sets of issues are in front of the Canadian people. The Canadian voters are on the one hand looking for the rationale for the change, because after all for past 10 years or so, Liberals have been in power. In fact, if you go back and see as a history, from 1993 to 2024, there have been only 4 prime ministers in Canada, and only one of them was Conservative Prime Minister.
Yes.
So in that sense, the change indicates shifting of power to another party, that is the Conservatives party. But on the other hand, you have this whole American angle, and there is this very broad perception that Canadians feel that America has not treated them well. So it really is a toss-up between those who want change and those who want a tougher approach, a more realistic approach.
Yes.
By someone who is perhaps, seen the world,
yes,
who has handled
Mr. Mark Carney has every reason to thank President Trump.
It's a very narrow choice.
Yeah,
it's a very
choice.
Fine choice.
Yeah. Tight choice, important choice. Let's quickly now welcome Priti Martin, who's a candidate for the House of Commons. She's joining us live to talk more about what she thinks could be the X factor in these elections. She's a candidate for Calgary East. Interestingly, she's not a candidate from the Conservative Party, which her father had represented, I believe, for 7 terms, and she's chosen to be a candidate from the Liberal Party. Priti, talk to us about what is it that your message has been to the people of Calgary East, and why is it that they should elect you?
There's actually 2 messages, but the most important one is to protect our sovereignty. we are being under attack, and this is a chance to do it peacefully, and this is a chance to do it intelligently and have an rather than have an economic and tariff war, to be able to handle this with precision and with an understanding of how to basically negotiate effectively with Mr. Carney. My other issue is that I come from a city or a province where for the longest time everybody's been fighting with the province or with the federal government, and you can't get anything done. And we know that the way to get things done is to be at the table. And so here's a chance to be strategic and to be able to bring resources, and all the things that my province is complaining about, we can actually address it right now, especially since the leaders of our province, which would be equivalent to your states, is not being nice or trying to play or bring resources back because they're too busy trying to get elected and keep staying in power just by being angry. And also, thank you for welcoming me.
I want to ask you about the Indo-Canadians in this election, and then I'm going to go back to Vikram, who's standing by from British Columbia. But first, Priti, I want to understand from you the Indo-Canadians in this election. How important are they as a group, and what are their focus and priorities?
Well, I can tell you what has happened right now is the Indo-Canadians are not actually feeling seen. They're not feeling valued as part of the election process in certain parties because they are not aware, or the people behind the scenes or in certain parties are not aware on how to deal with international diplomacy. And so they're being guided in a way that is not as effective, and it's actually hurting Indo-Canadians themselves from participating. There's a division that's happening, and it's happening on the inside, and many Indo-Canadians across Canada are very angry. It is a very important time for their voice. I have a feeling they are going to be making how they vote is going to be reflective on how they feel they are being welcomed into each party.
All right, let's get in Don Patel. He's a Conservative candidate joining us live to talk more about, well, at this stage, Mr. Patel, it seems that while we are talking, President Trump has tweeted, has put out a message on social media. Given the fact that President Trump has been the single biggest factor for the increase in ratings for the Liberal Party, do you think this would be the last-ditch dampening effort for the Conservative Party?
Well, thank you for having me over here. Let me just quickly correct it. And I'm no longer a Conservative candidate from Etobicoke North riding because they just disallowed me to run further for some other reasons and factor after came on the ballot.
Okay.
But as just Priti mentioned, that Indo-Canadians are really frustrated. What is happening around here? How is our bilateral relationship will be improved? And that's where all of our Indo-Canadians are looking into the leaders, whether it's Pierre Poilievre in Conservative or whether it's a Mark Carney from Liberal. We all are feeling right now that we have been sidetracked or we have been put aside. Our voice is not heard. So I really congratulate all the candidates of Indo-Canadian diaspora who has put their name forward coming into this election. As you just mentioned, yes, Mr. President Trump is the first factor right now with this sovereignty. We're talking about it. Which will be the leader who will be focusing to control or not control, but to decide and to work with not only U.S., but also with India, because our relationship in last few years has been deteriorated badly. It doesn't matter which factor it came into this one. We were not able to bring this, we should not be bringing this other country's politics into this country, but it has been. But now it's our turn at this point of today in 45th federal election that in South Asians who were actually lacking to go out and do the voting, they will go out and vote and make sure their voice is heard.
This is a question I asked to both Mr. Patel as well as Priti, which is that how important is the Khalistani issue right now in these elections, and how do you see that being addressed going forward by whoever is the next Prime Minister? Priti, to you first.
Okay. I actually think it's not as important within Canada right now because Canadians are more worried about our own issues, and our biggest issue is the threat from the US. So it really doesn't factor. In fact, it's more about uniting us. Nobody wants to talk about it because we are Indo-Canadians and we need to focus on a Canadian issue. That's not a Canadian issue. So those who are trying to make it an issue are actually failing because it's not catching. It's not lighting us up. There are a few groups that are very much, that is their focus, but it is not the rest of Indo-Canadian focus.
Mr. Patel, respond to that quickly. Then I get in some of the other cases.
I differ a little bit on that one. It is an Indo-Canadian issue because, as I mentioned earlier, this Khalistan factor, which is a very minor factor bringing into the mainstream Canadian, which should not be an election issue because there is lots of other Canadian points and mainstream we should be focusing on that. But whoever bought this Khalistan factor into this particular election or into the Canadian mainstream, this should not be bought at all. That the Indo-Canadian especially are frustrated with that.
All right. Mr. Vikas Vagre, very quickly, you want to come in there?
Absolutely. And I agree that it's not a mainstream issue in terms of what's the key criteria that elections are being fought on right now. But I would add that my own ecosystem here in GTA, there's a very strong undercurrent in the community with the way the foreign policy was handled in the past, especially related to Khalistan. So this undercurrent is likely to have an impact on the choice of candidates as well. Right?
That's an important aspect. And I want to put that out to Ambassador Bhatia as well, who's with me here in the studio, which is that how big an impact do you think the elections will have on the issue that continues to strain our relations, which is the Khalistani issue, the fact that Canadian governments do shelter Khalistani extremists and terrorists. New Delhi has raised those concerns in the past. Justin Trudeau is no more the Prime Minister. But do you think that will be the end of these policies, or how do you see that being addressed going forward?
Thank you for coming back to me. I think this question being put to a former diplomat just a few days after the Pahalgam tragedy, I think the answer is very clear. India's position is extremely clear-cut on when it comes to terrorism. And there is no doubt that Canada across the political spectrum will have to probably consider somehow improving its position on international terrorism. So we quite clearly have understood and heard the various voices from Canada. This is a play of democracy, but at the end of the day, there would be need to see improvement in Canadian approach. And as far as India-Canada relations are concerned, one can say in a nutshell, the ball is in Canada's court.
The ball is in Canada's court and it needs to act on this. As we wrap things up, do we still have Vikram with us? I want to go back to Vikram to really get a sense of what it's like on ground, the latest updates. As we keep track of the election, I want to quickly get in a word from... all right, we're going to try and connect that in just a bit. Before that, I want to quickly tell our viewers tuning in right now, Canada Decides is your one-stop destination to get you everything related to Canadian elections. Voting has begun in parts of Canada, and it's only, I think, in about a couple of hours when voting will be underway in full swing. And very quickly, as we wrap this up, let me ask this to Mr. Sai, question around visas, students, something that has become a major concern. Do you think immigration-related issues, particularly for students, is something that will be addressed in the next government's tenure?
Oh, absolutely. I think either party is focused on immigration, and that will continue to be the main idea moving forward. But based on which party, some of the things might get fine-tuned. For instance, the Conservatives might go a little more harder on the asylum seekers, wherein the Liberals have over the last decade brought in close to 500,000 asylum seekers. So those are the nuances that might come into play, but immigration would still continue to be a key focus for Canada to build its socio-economic system in the future.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me in this very special show, Canada Decides. We'll keep coming back to you with all the details about a very significant election that we at NDTV World are keeping a very close watch on. Thank you so much for watching this very special show. Thank you so much. And keep sitting, sir. Keep sitting, sir. Keep sitting, sir. We'll take...